Okay, so we've got that dirty purple color ready to go. I'm just looking over the limb to make sure I'm happy with the mottling, and the blue mottling layer that is. And on this limb it looks a little faint actually. I'm having trouble seeing it, but that's okay because once you've cured it all on, you can always go back and add more. It's easier to add more than it is to take off excess. So if it's looking a little too light, I don't sweat that at all. So I'm going to make sure this sort of dirty purple is all mixed together. I'm going to add it to my sponge. And we're going to apply it to the limbs. This is actually one of my favorite layers to do because it looks so gross and so awesome all at the same time. Like, this to me is when it really starts looking like a real baby. Just gonna apply it everywhere. And there we go. Like, doesn't that look awesome? I love how this looks. Like, honestly, you could stop right here. If you're a beginner, if you're on a tight budget for time or money, this is great. You can still create a highly professional looking doll without going any further. This just looks so cool and awesome. I'm just filling in the creases here. My little spongy do thing. But it looks phenomenal. And one thing that I'm also noticing is I love how it looks in the creases. And one thing that you will quickly learn about me is my creases color. I make it up as I go along. So whenever I see something in the creases and I'm like, oh yeah, then I'll tend to go with that. I know that sounds very scientific. But yeah, I really do like how it looks in the creases of this doll, and we've got a ton of creases to paint, so we're gonna want a color that looks natural there, that gives the level of highlighting that we want without being overkill. Which is why you should never use the Bountiful baby color called creases. It's way too dark. Okay, so this is looking cool. We're gonna let that dry and go ahead and hit everything else up. Okay, so once again I finished all the limbs and I've got a little bit of paint left. We're gonna do the face. I'm gonna dilute it a little bit more because, as I said, I don't like to see a whole lot of mottling on the face, like on the temples and around the eyes, but not on the cheeks necessarily. So I'm gonna create a much more translucent layer. I'm going to wring out the sponge so I'm not transferring paint from earlier. Actually surprisingly dry. And we're going to hit up the temples first, the temples and the scalp, and then as we run out of paint, we'll go back and hit the cheeks and the nose and the facial features. This out of the way so we have space. Okay, I'm gonna give it a good look over. So I don't know if you can see it, but the blue mottling looks very nice on the scalp. It's subtle but visible. I'm loving it in this temple area, and I hardly see it on the cheeks, so we got exactly what we were going for. I also want to make sure that I don't have excessive paint in and around the ears or in the creases. I'm not seeing that, so I'm very pleased. Okay, I'm going to blot this guy off. I'm going to go right for the temple area. Go around the top of the hairline and get right into this temple. And one of the really awesome things about the Realborns is that they're so true to life in the detail. So on some doll kits, you're kind of like, okay, I think the temple is here, because that's where I would expect it to be, but the sculpt isn't really giving you an indication one way or another. The Realborns, I can see it. Like, there is a defined triangular shape where I would expect the temple to be. There's a very defined triangular shape where the soft spot or the fontanelle should be. So I just love these Realborn kits. And I hope I have the opportunity to make more of them in the future. Okay, so my sponge is starting to dry out, so now I'm going to get around the eyes. And by dry out, I mean it's running out of paint. I'm going to hit up the forehead. Now you can see it's a lot more sparse color now. Almost looks like capillaries actually, it's kind of cool. And I'm going to hit up the cheeks with just this itty bitty bit of paint that I have left. So it's subtle, it's still there, but it's not screaming at you, it's just the right amount. So I'm liking that. Then I'm going to take the little sponge thingy and get those hard to reach places. Around the eyelids, in the mouth, this little cleft chin. Have you ever noticed a lot of doll kits have cleft chins? Which for me is kind of frustrating because I do portraits and there are far more doll kits that have cleft chins than there are babies. So that's interesting and kind of annoying. Okay, I'm going to go back and soak up these things that I blotted because my sponge is still pretty dry. Spread it around. Okay, and then get my mop and make sure I don't have anything accumulating. You may wonder why I model in the nostrils. I'm not going to hollow out the nostrils, so they will remain intact when the doll is finished. They will be darkened, but I just like to make sure I paint in there because we don't want to miss the same area twice. So if I'm avoiding the nostrils, I'm going to be avoiding the area around the nostrils as well, and that's something that we can't afford to do. So just like to be thorough. Feeling good about this layer. I'm gonna let it dry and see if we need to come back and add more paint or not. Okay, so we gave that limb a look over. At this point it's got two layers, the vein blue and the dirty purple, and now we're gonna add what Kate calls the periwinkle. And you can get the recipe for that from the tutorial that's for sale on my website at the link below. This is a layer that you want to keep as translucent as possible because it gets really dark really quickly. Any of the blues, you really have to be careful of that. I do like seeing a lot of blue on my feet, so I'm going to get a little more paint. Should have started there actually. Be sure to blot your sponge before you use it. You don't want to get too much paint. And be sure to rotate your piece a few times so you can see if there are any big spots that you missed. Little spots that you missed is the goal, but big spots that you missed is a problem. Okay, as I was mentioning, this periwinkle color gets very dark, so you have to be careful with it. If you end up with a layer that you think is too dark, feel free to take a clean sponge, a clean dry sponge, and just pull off a little bit of that paint. Keep turning your sponge so you're not landing it back in the same place, but you're not stuck with it. If something's not looking right to you while it's still wet, go ahead and start blotting back off. It's not going to disturb the layers under it because you allowed those to dry. This is the back plate with the third mottling layer, the periwinkle. It's still a little wet. This is in more natural light. It's drying, so I just wanted you to have another view of how the mottling looks. Alright, so I'm ready to create my fourth and final mottling layer, In the tutorial on my website, there are 6 layers. I'm going to be omitting the last 2 because it's way more color than is needed for these 2 portrait dolls. So these babies are not highly modeled, so I won't be adding more mottling than is needed. And again, because I don't own this recipe, I can't tell you what's in it, but I'll show you how I mix it. This is what Kate calls the blood red color. It looks actually quite a lot like the blushing color. So if you're the kind of person that can't stand the sight of blood, if I do it right, it should bother you. You'll also notice as you're looking at these videos and reading through Kate's tutorials, I don't exactly follow what she does. You know, every artist has their own style, and like I mentioned in the 5 never fail rules of reborning, with any tutorial, keep what works for you and throw out what doesn't, and that's inclusive of my tutorials too. If there's something I do that you don't like, you don't have to replicate it, because the goal is to make it yours. So these are guidelines, these are suggestions, these are demos of what has been done, but you don't have to replicate it if you're not feeling it. So a lot of Kate's colors are actually more concentrated than I can tolerate, so I have a tendency to dilute them more. So we finished the 4 mottling layers that I'm going to do for this doll kit. I actually gave it the weekend to dry, so all of the layers have had plenty of time to dry thoroughly. And the last thing I'm going to do is give them another look over with fresh eyes to make sure that there aren't any excessively dark spots anywhere. If I see any excessively dark spots, I'm going to take a Q-tip and buff those out to the consistency or to the level of brightness that I want. The next thing we're going to do is put it in the oven. I like to bake it for 9 minutes at 250 degrees on my new wave oven. That is 60% power. I also find it useful to make a mark on the flange with the paint that you used so that you can test to ensure that the paint has cured without having to handle the actual vinyl part. So this is an area you can test without damaging the doll. It's also good to mark the flange for each layer because, at least for me, when I'm multitasking several doll kits, I can sometimes lose track of where I left off, so it's good to be able to have a visual confirmation of, okay, this has one cured base coat layer, that must mean I'm on the mottling now, or that must mean I'm on the veining now. So just a little thing that I do that helps me stay organized. So we're going to bake these and then we'll be ready to add some veins. Thanks for watching.